Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. 3 months ago, I was sleeping beneath a bridge in Denver, cold, filthy, and living off scraps from dumpsters, convinced I'd die there and no one would even notice. My name is Ethan Wade, and until not long ago, I thought I had myself figured out. A 50-year-old logistics manager who'd spent his entire adult life trying to build something steady, something real. My ex-wife, Laura, shattered all that when she left me for my billionaire boss, Victor Hutchinson. Together, they tore down everything I'd worked for over 25 years. They didn't just take my job, they took my home, my savings, my reputation, and somehow managed to twist my own kids against me. I used to think there was no lower place to fall, but rock bottom isn't just losing what you have, it's losing who you are. On February 18th, after weeks of drifting between alleys and shelters, I finally checked into a downtown homeless center. I didn't expect kindness or even a bed. I just wanted somewhere warm to close my eyes. The woman at the desk introduced herself as Sandra Pollson. She looked tired, maybe mid-40s, with kind eyes and the sort of face that had seen too much hardship to be easily surprised. But when she looked at my ID, her whole demeanor changed. Her smile vanished. She stared at my driver's license like it was written in another language, then slowly lifted her gaze back to me. "Your name is Ethan Wade?" she asked quietly, voice trembling. I nodded, confused by her tone. She swallowed hard. "Born March 15th, 1974, Millbrook, Pennsylvania." When I confirmed again, she stood so abruptly her chair smacked against the wall. Every head in the waiting room turned. Without saying another word, she walked to the office door, locked it, and pulled down the blinds. The air in the room thickened. A couple of guys sitting nearby started whispering to each other. I could feel my pulse picking up. Sandra fumbled for her phone, fingers shaking, and made a call that I'd later realize marked the end of my old life. "This is intake station 12, she said into the phone, her eyes fixed on me like I was something radioactive. "Authorization code 77 Alpha 9. We've found him. Yes, I'm certain. Ethan Wade just walked through our door." She listened for a long few seconds. Whatever she heard must have terrified her, because all the color drained from her face. "Understood," she whispered, locking down now. Then she hung up, exhaled shakily, and went to a locked drawer. From inside, she pulled out a manila folder so old it looked like it had been waiting there for decades. The tab read, "Testament Program, Subject 7, Presumed Deceased." I laughed nervously, assuming there had to be some mix-up. "You've got the wrong guy," I told her, but she didn't respond. She just stared at me like she was watching a ghost try to talk. She opened the file, and inside were photos, dozens of them. Some were black and white, others color, some so clear they looked recent. But they were all me. My face, at different ages, standing beside people I didn't recognize, in places I'd never been. One photo showed me in military fatigues, smiling beside a man labeled Hutchinson R. Another showed me shaking hands with a group of people in suits under a banner that said, "Testament Field Phase 2, 2003. I couldn't breathe. Sandra whispered, "You shouldn't exist." My hands went cold. She pushed the file toward me and said, "Mr. Wade, someone is going to be here soon to take you somewhere safe. Please don't leave this building." But the fear in her voice didn't sound like she was protecting me. It sounded like she was protecting everyone else from me. I tried to ask what was going on, but before I could get a word out, a loud buzzer went off overhead. The shelter lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the heavy thud of metal doors locking into place. Sandra looked at her phone, then at me, and whispered one last thing before two men in gray uniforms appeared in the doorway. "They said you died in 1999. She flipped the folder open, and the first thing staring back at me was a photo of a baby, maybe 3 months old, cheeks round, eyes wide, wrapped in one of those old hospital blankets. The kid had a birthmark on his left shoulder, same spot as mine, same shape too, a little crescent moon like somebody pressed a thumbprint of shadow into the skin. My stomach dropped. "Mr. Wade," Sandra said, trying to sound professional, but I could hear something shaking underneath. Fear, awe, maybe both. "We've been looking for you for 30 years. According to every system we have, federal, medical, even archived defense records, you're not supposed to be alive. You died in a laboratory fire in 1977 when you were 3 years old." I actually laughed, because what else do you do when someone tells you you're a dead man? I figured she had mixed me up with another Ethan Wade, maybe some cold case kid. But she slid the next page toward me, and that laugh died in my throat. It wasn't my birth certificate. The name at the top said Noah Kesler, and the parents listed weren't Helen and Frank Wade, the good, ordinary people from Pennsylvania who raised me, paid for my Little League, taught me to change oil, and cried when I left for college. The mother's name on this form was Dr. Evelyn Kesler, occupation, biochemist, employer, Testament Research Institute. The father's name was blacked out with heavy ink, like somebody really didn't want me to know who he was. "This is insane," I told her, shaking my head. "I'm not some secret kid from a science lab. I'm a warehouse guy. I manage truck schedules, I make sure pallets don't go missing. My wife dumped me for my billionaire boss, and now I'm sleeping in shelters. You've got the wrong man." Sandra just looked at me with sad eyes and slowly shook her head. "Mr. Wade, in about 10 minutes, federal agents are going to come through that door. I don't know which agency, and I don't know how many, but I know they've been waiting 3 decades for this moment. Some of them will want to move you somewhere secure. Some of them may not want you walking out of here at all, so I need you to understand this before they arrive." She leaned in, voice low. "Your birth mother did not die in an accident. She was killed trying to keep you away from people who wanted to turn you into a tool, a weapon. And the man you think just stole your career, Victor Hutchinson, he's been trying to find you longer than you've even known his name." That's when the floor kind of slid out from under me. Everything I thought was the story of my life, small-town childhood, hard work, marriage, kids, betrayal, suddenly felt like a cover wrapped around something bigger. The homeless guy who dragged himself into Mercy House that day wasn't just a washed-up logistics manager. He was apparently an asset worth more than anything Hutchinson owned, and not because I invented something or won the lottery, but because of what was running through my veins. My DNA, my blood, even my spit, according to Joyce, held information, formulas, maybe sequences that governments, corporations, and people with no conscience would do nasty things to control. And the worst part? I'd been walking around for 47 years like an average man, invisible, safe, because nobody knew where I was. Then I lost everything, got desperate, and walked right into their hands. Right on cue, there were 3 sharp knocks on the intake door, controlled, not angry, like professionals. Joyce's head snapped toward the sound. Then she looked back at me with urgency. "Mr. Wade, whatever happens after that door opens, remember this. Your mother died to give you a choice. She didn't run, she didn't sell you out, she didn't hand you over. She gave you a future. Now you're about to be offered another path, and it may not be the one you want. But before you choose, you need to know who you really are." And that's when my mind jumped backward, away from the locked room and the folder and the secret name, back to a time when life actually made sense. I wasn't always the guy dumpster diving under I-25. Just 6 months earlier, I was Ethan Wade, regional logistics manager at Hutchinson Industries, making $78,000 a year, health and dental, 401k, and a decent company SUV I could drive on weekends. I'd earned every bit of it, too. I started in that company at 25 on the warehouse floor, 3rd shift, steel-toed boots, learning how freight actually moves. I learned routes, mileage costs, fuel timing, which suppliers could be trusted, and which ones cut corners. I made myself valuable because I knew the system better than the computer did. Victor built a giant, shiny empire, but guys like me kept it humming. My life ran on schedules. At 5 a.m. every weekday, my alarm would go off in our 3-bedroom place in Highlands Ranch. Nice neighborhood, good schools, wide streets. I'd roll out of bed, head downstairs to the kitchen Laura had remodeled with white cabinets and that big farmhouse sink she'd wanted. I'd brew coffee, scramble eggs, open my laptop, and skim the overnight reports from our distribution centers in Pueblo and Cheyenne. Around 6:00, Laura would come down, still in her robe, kiss me on the cheek out of habit more than passion, and we'd talk about the kids while I ate. Lydia, our daughter, had just finished nursing school at Colorado State and got on at Presbyterian Hospital, which made Laura proud because our girl was in a respectable profession. Our son, Eric, 19, stubborn, sharp with his hands, was halfway through an electrician apprenticeship, already making more per hour than I did at his age, doing weekend installs for contractors. 25 years of marriage. That's what I thought we had. 2 kids launched, mortgage under control, retirement somewhere on the horizon. Yeah, we weren't newlyweds anymore. The spark wasn't fireworks every night. We talked more about bills than dreams. But I figured that was just what happens when you grow up, when you build a life. I had no idea that while I was organizing shipping lanes and believing I was an ordinary man, somebody else was running an entirely different file on me, one that said I'd died before I ever learned to ride a bike. We weren't really a couple anymore, not in the way we used to be. We'd become teammates running a household, balancing the checkbook, syncing calendars, talking about when we could finally retire somewhere warmer. I told myself it was normal, that every long marriage eventually traded romance for rhythm. Laura started going to the gym more, changing her hairstyle, swapping sweaters for dresses that looked like they belonged in a different life. I was proud of her. Honestly, I told her she looked amazing, and I meant it. I had no idea those changes weren't for me. For 2 years, my wife had been having an affair with my boss, Victor Hutchinson, the same man who smiled in every photo on our company's website, who'd toasted me at holiday parties for keeping the machine running, who'd slipped his arm around my shoulder for group pictures. While I was chasing deadlines and worrying about budgets, he was taking Laura to hotels under fake conference names, charging dinners and rooms to the corporate account. I wasn't even trusted to use for legitimate business trips. Victor was 62, with perfectly combed silver hair and that deep, artificial tan rich men get from skiing all winter in Aspen. He was worth nearly $4 billion. Defense contracts, overseas shipping, private jets, the whole empire. His first wife had died of cancer, and ever since, he'd burned through women like new toys, each one younger, thinner, more easily impressed. Laura caught his eye at a company fundraiser, one of those events where spouses were encouraged to mingle while we managers gave speeches about efficiency metrics and logistical innovation. While I was talking about route optimization, he was introducing himself to my wife at the bar. She later admitted that's when it started. She said it like she was describing an accident, not a choice. The divorce hit out of nowhere, a Monday morning in August. Clear sky, everything ordinary until I opened my front door and saw a stranger in a suit sitting on my couch. "Mr. Wade," he said smoothly, "I represent your wife." Laura was standing by the window, arms crossed, silent. The lawyer handed me the papers: divorce, property transfer, spousal support. "Mrs. Wade believes it's best if you both move forward separately," he said, voice polished, rehearsed. "She's requesting the house, both vehicles, and an equitable portion of shared assets." I remember blinking, trying to make sense of the words. "Equitable portion?" "She works part-time at the library," I said. "What income disparity?" Laura finally spoke. Her voice was calm, too calm. "Ethan, I haven't been happy for years. You're married to your job. You stopped seeing me a long time ago. I need someone who appreciates me." I stood there, unable to speak, watching 25 years crumble like wet paper. I hired a lawyer using what was left of my 401k, thinking I could fight it, thinking fairness still meant something. But her legal team, funded quietly by Victor Sawicz, had built a perfect case. They painted me as an obsessive worker who ignored his family, a husband who emotionally checked out. They had attendance records from my son's football games showing I'd missed 3. They had Laura's friends testifying she spent nights alone, crying. They had text messages where I'd postponed dinners because of shipment delays. The judge didn't hesitate. Laura got the house, both cars, 60% of the savings, and $500 a month in alimony for 3 years. I got a 1-bedroom extended stay off Interstate 25 and a box of clothes that smelled like someone else's life. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd get back on my feet, find work, rebuild. But the next morning, the phone rang. It was Victor. "Come to my office," he said. "We need to talk." I should have known better. When I walked in, he was behind that oversized mahogany desk that looked more like a throne. The view behind him stretched over the entire city, glass and money gleaming under the sun. Laura was sitting in the corner, scrolling through her phone, admiring her nails like she was bored. "Tom," Victor said with fake warmth, "I'll get right to it. We're restructuring. Your position's being phased out effective immediately. Security will help you clear your desk. You'll get 2 weeks severance. More than fair, I'd say." I stared at him. "You're firing me? I've been here 25 years. I built your entire distribution model from scratch." He leaned back, fingertips pressed together. The kind of gesture powerful men use when they are pretending to empathize. "The company's moving forward. It's nothing personal. Fresh starts are good for everyone, don't you think?" That's when Laura looked up. Her expression wasn't angry or guilty. It was satisfied, like she'd finally finished some long, quiet competition I didn't know we were in. Security came in, 2 guys I'd known for years. They didn't say a word as I packed up my things: a coffee mug, framed photos of the kids, a few pens, a stress ball shaped like a globe. That little globe used to sit on my desk as a reminder that the world was bigger than the job. Now it just felt like a cruel joke. My keycard stopped working before I reached the elevator. My company car had to be surrendered by morning. Marcus, the guard at the front desk, a man whose kid I'd once helped get hired, couldn't even meet my eyes. He just nodded when I thanked him, and I walked out with my box, 25 years condensed into a few pounds of failure, Back at the extended stay, I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the wall, thinking about how easily everything I'd built had been erased. My marriage, my career, my future, gone in a single week. And the man who'd taken it all had no idea just how much deeper the tellin' about me really went, or that one day it would come crashing back to him. I was 50 years old, with more than 2 decades of solid experience under my belt. I'd managed teams, reorganized warehouses, cut costs, and boosted efficiency by nearly 40% at every company I'd touched. My resume looked bulletproof. My references, at least from everyone before Hutchinson Industries, were glowing. So finding work again should have been easy, right? But I underestimated just how far Victor Hutchinson's shadow reached. Every interview went perfectly until the part where they called to verify my employment. Then, like clockwork, the tone changed. Suddenly the job was filled internally, or budget priorities had shifted, or they just stopped responding. After the 5th rejection, I knew it wasn't coincidence. It was sabotage. Victor wanted me gone from the industry, erased like I'd never existed. My savings disappeared faster than I'd planned. Within a few months, I couldn't afford rent at the extended stay. My younger brother Mark let me crash on his couch. He was 47, worked construction, lived in a 1-bedroom in Aurora that always smelled like cigarettes, cheap coffee, and drywall dust. He meant well. "Tommy, this is temporary," he kept saying. "You're going to bounce back. Guys like you always do." For a while, I believed him. I told myself all I needed was one decent break. But nights kept getting longer, and the whiskey kept getting cheaper. I started hitting bars alone, drinking until last call, trying not to think about Laura and Victor in their house. My house. After 3 weeks of me stumbling home at 2 in the morning, reeking of booze and bad decisions, Mark lost his patience. The breaking point came when I puked on his carpet and started yelling at his neighbor for looking at me wrong. "You gotta go, man," he said quietly, his voice tired. "I love you, but I can't do this. You're spiraling." He was right. I packed my duffel and left without saying goodbye. My mom, Helen Wade, was 81, living at Mountain View Senior Care. She survived on Social Security and whatever was left of Dad's pension after he died 5 years earlier. When I told her what had happened, she cried over the phone. "Tommy, come stay with me," she pleaded. "We'll figure it out." But we both knew her facility didn't allow guests, and even if it did, I wasn't about to let my elderly mother see me like that. A week later, she mailed me $300 from her savings, money she needed for her medications. I sent it back. She sent it again. The 3rd time, I kept it and bought whiskey instead of food. I hated myself for it, but self-hatred doesn't fill your stomach. It just numbs your pride long enough to pour another drink. My Uncle Leonard, Dad's younger brother, tried to help too. 73, retired postal worker, living on a fixed income. Still, he wired me $500 with a note that said, Frank would want me to help his boy. That broke me. I told myself I'd use it to start over, maybe get a used car or pay first month's rent somewhere cheap. Instead, 4 days later, I woke up behind a liquor store with empty bottles around me, my wallet gone, and no memory of how I got there. I sat there in the cold, head pounding, thinking I'd finally reached the bottom, but I was wrong. The real gut punch came from my own kids. Laura got to them first. She told them I'd been fired for embezzlement, that I'd stolen company funds to cover gambling debts. She even showed them proof, faked bank statements, forged emails, manufactured transfers. All of it doctored to look like I'd siphoned money from Hutchinson Industries. I found out from a text. Lydia, my baby girl, the one I taught to ride a bike, the one I walked down the aisle 2 years before, sent one message before blocking my number. "I can't believe you'd steal from the company that gave you everything. Don't contact me again." I stared at that screen for hours, waiting for her to change her mind. She never did. Eric came to see me once while I was still at Mark's. He didn't even step inside. Stood in the doorway like I was contagious. "Mom showed me the evidence, Dad," he said, his voice shaking. "How could you do this? My boss heard about it. Lydia's husband wants to know if we need lawyers. You've embarrassed all of us." I tried to explain, tried to tell him it was lies, that Victor had set me up, but he just shook his head. "You're drunk, Dad. You've always got an excuse. I'm done." Then he turned and walked away. I haven't seen him since. By December, winter slammed into Denver like a freight train. Nights dropped below zero, and I had nowhere to go. I rented a small storage unit with the last of my cash, told myself it was temporary shelter until I found work. I kept everything I had left in boxes labeled like relics of a vanished life. Kitchen items, work awards, family photos. I slept on a pile of old clothes under a blanket that smelled like mildew. I'd wake to the sound of trucks in the loading bay and pretend I was still managing logistics somewhere, that I had purpose. On Christmas Eve, the facility manager found me sleeping inside. He called the cops. They arrested me for trespassing. I spent 24 hours in a holding cell that smelled like bleach and despair. When they released me the next day, I walked back to the storage facility. My key code didn't work. My belongings had already been auctioned off for unpaid rent. Everything, photos, awards, pieces of my old life, was gone. I stood there in the freezing wind, empty-handed, realizing that whatever man I used to be had been stripped away, piece by piece, until all that was left was the name Ethan Wade, and even that, as I'd soon learn, wasn't truly mine. I learned fast that survival had its own kind of map. The bridge under Spear Boulevard trapped the heat better than the one by the Platte River. The downtown library was a godsend if you kept your head down and pretended to read. Nobody bothered you until closing. St. Francis served the best soup in the city at noon and again at 6. But you had to sit through a sermon first, half the crowd praying only for seconds. I stopped shaving, not by choice, but because razors cost money and mirrors reminded me of who I used to be. 30 pounds gone in 2 months, ribs showing through layers of borrowed clothes, hands trembling constantly, part withdrawal, part cold, part fear. I used to think I knew what exhaustion was, but nothing compares to that bone-deep fatigue of the streets, the kind where even sleeping feels like work. When February came, so did a blizzard that turned Denver into a white graveyard. 3 men froze to death within 2 blocks of each other. I would have been the 4th if Raymond hadn't found me. Raymond Rodriguez was 60, a Vietnam vet who'd been living rough ever since the VA cut his disability benefits. He had the hard calm of someone who'd already survived the worst. He found me half buried under snow behind a dumpster near Colfax, barely conscious, my skin bluish-gray. He dragged me to a heating vent behind an office building, wrapped me in a sleeping bag he said he borrowed from a sporting goods store, and stayed awake all night to make sure I didn't stop breathing. "You're dying, Tommy," he told me when the sun came up, voice raspy but steady. "You won't make it another week out here. There's a shelter, Mercy House, over on 32nd. They got beds, doctors, caseworkers. They'll get you papers, help you file for disability maybe, but you gotta go today before your legs give out." He gave me half a granola bar and pointed me toward the main road. I don't remember much of that walk except the cold cutting into me like glass. 4 miles through knee-deep snow, feet numb inside boots held together with duct tape, coughing blood into a rag that used to be my shirt. By the time I saw the brown brick building with the faded white cross over the door, it looked like heaven itself. Mercy House wasn't pretty. The windows were barred, the walls cracked, the smell of disinfectant mixed with sweat and despair. But it was warm, and that was enough. The lobby was crowded with men in various stages of defeat, sitting in plastic chairs, their faces blank, waiting for their names to be called like souls lined up for judgment. Everything about the intake process was designed to break you down. They searched every pocket for weapons, drugs, booze, anything to prove you still had a shred of control. Then they dusted me with delousing powder that burned my skin and made my eyes sting like fire. They took my clothes, tossed them in a bin, and handed me a gray jumpsuit that smelled like bleach and other men's sweat. I sat for 3 hours under flickering lights, trying not to cough, wondering if they'd run out of beds before they got to me. By the time the woman at window 12 called my name, I barely had the strength to stand. Her name tag read Sandra Pollson. She was already typing before I even sat down, the way you do when you've done something 1,000 times and stopped caring who's on the other side of the desk. "Name?" she asked without looking up. "Ethan Wade," I said, my voice rough, my throat raw from pneumonia. She typed, "Date of birth?" "March 15th, 1974. She typed again. "Place of birth?" "Millbrook, Pennsylvania." That's when everything shifted. Her hands froze above the keyboard. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the silence. Slowly she looked up, her expression tightening as if she'd just seen a ghost wearing my face. Without a word, she stood so fast her chair slammed into the filing cabinet. Then she disappeared into the back room. The men in the waiting area started whispering. "What's his problem?" one said. "Probably got warrants," another replied. "Bet they're calling the cops." I remember thinking that was fine. Jail meant heat and food. But Sandra didn't come back with the cops. She came back with a man who looked like he'd stepped out of another world. Navy suit, polished shoes, gray hair trimmed sharp, eyes like searchlights. His name was Adrian Blackwood. He didn't belong anywhere near a homeless shelter, and yet he looked perfectly at home telling people what to do. He studied me for a long moment, face unreadable. "Mr. Wade," he said finally, his voice steady but laced with something like awe. "I need you to listen carefully. What I'm about to ask may sound strange, but it's important." He leaned closer, lowering his tone. "Do you remember anything from before you were adopted? Anything from your first 3 years?" The word adopted hit like an electric shock. My brain scrambled to make sense of it. "Adopted?" I repeated, voice thin, more whisper than sound. My entire life, I'd believed I was born to Helen and Frank Wade, that Pennsylvania was my beginning. But the way Blackwood was looking at me, like I'd just said the wrong name for myself, told me that whatever I thought I knew about my past was about to be rewritten. "What are you talking about? I wasn't adopted. Helen and Frank Wade are my parents." The words came out sharp, instinctive. Like my voice was trying to protect a T. Helen my mind wasn't ready to question. Sandra and Blackwood exchanged a look that made my stomach twist. "Mr. Wade," Sandra said softly, "would you consent to some biometric scans? Fingerprints, retinal scan, DNA swab, just to confirm your identity. It's not criminal. We have a database for missing and protected persons. Your name triggered a red alert." I was too tired to argue, too cold and weak to care if they were calling the FBI or ICE or whoever. I just wanted warmth and a bed. Sandra guided me down a short hallway into a small, sterile room filled with equipment that looked like it belonged in a government lab, not a homeless shelter. A computer hummed in the corner. Red and green lights blinked across panels. She pressed my fingertips against a digital scanner. Beep. Had me look into a lens that flashed bright blue. Beep. Then she swabbed the inside of my cheek and fed the sample into a small machine that whirred softly like a printer. Each test produced a new beep, followed by a green light, followed by Joyce's face draining of color. "It's him," she whispered to Blackwood, her voice trembling. 9.9% genomic match. Testament subject 7. He's alive." Blackwood didn't hesitate. He pulled out a phone that didn't look like anything I'd seen before. Black, matte, no logos, built like military hardware. "This is Director Blackwood, Department of Displaced Persons. Authorization code 77 Alpha 9. We've located Testament subject Wade. Yes, positive ID. Initiate containment protocol. No one enters or leaves this facility until further notice." I tried to stand, but my knees buckled. "What the hell is Testament? No, what are you people talking about? I'm not some secret experiment. I just need antibiotics and a bed. You've got the wrong man." Blackwood stepped closer, calm but intense. "Mr. Wade, in about 10 minutes, this building will be surrounded by federal personnel. Some of them have been looking for you since the Carter administration. Others would rather your name never appear in any file again. Either way, your life as Ethan Wade ends today. But before that happens, you deserve to know the tellin' about who you are." Sandra came back holding a thick manila folder stamped in red. Classified, Testament Program, Subject 7, presumed deceased, 1977. She laid it on the table like it might burn through. When Blackwood opened it, the air in the room seemed to change. Inside were photographs, charts, old government forms, and a birth certificate that didn't belong to Ethan Wade. It was for someone named Noah Kesler. The mother, Dr. Evelyn Kesler, biochemist, age 28. The father, redacted. Entire paragraphs blacked out with ink so thick it soaked through the paper. "This can't be real," I said, my hands shaking. The photo on the first page showed a baby with the same crescent-shaped birthmark I had on my shoulder, the same hazel green eyes, even the same tiny curve in the right ear that Laura used to tease me about. "Mr. Wade," Blackwood said quietly, "your mother died getting you out of that facility. She gave her life to make sure you'd have one. And now, 30 years later, you've walked straight back into the world that made you." He began spreading documents across the table, maps, lab notes, even grainy security photos labeled Testament Site 1. Abandoned, 1977 fire. One sheet was a birth record for Noah Kesler, born January 8, 1974. My entire life, I'd celebrated March 15th. "Your mother," Blackwood continued, "was a genius. Graduated from MIT at 19, earned her PhD in biochemistry by 23. The government recruited her in 1970 for a classified genetics program under the Department of Defense. They told her she'd be curing diseases, preventing genetic disorders, saving lives. But what she didn't know was that the project, codenamed Testament, wasn't about healing, it was about building." He handed me a black and white photo of a young woman in a lab coat. Sharp eyes, determined face, a hint of exhaustion behind her smile. "Diana Kesler," he said, "was one of the lead researchers developing synthetic gene replication models for what they called the Prime Initiative. The goal was to create biologically enhanced subjects with hybrid immunity and accelerated cellular regeneration. Living blueprints, if you will. I stared at the photo, unable to breathe. You're saying my mother was trying to build people? Not exactly, Blackwood said. She was trying to stop others from doing it the wrong way. When she discovered what the project was really for, military use, weaponized biology, she tried to shut it down. That's when she vanished. The official story said she died in a lab fire, but she didn't die there. She got one subject out, her own son. He looked at me like he was looking at the answer to a riddle he'd spent half his life chasing. That's you, Mr. Wade, the seventh prototype, the only survivor. The room went silent, except for the hum of the machines. My mind was spinning, rejecting every word. My life, my memories, my parents. All of it suddenly felt like scenes from someone else's story. I looked down at my shaking hands and whispered, if all this is true, then who the hell am I? What they didn't tell her was that the entire operation was being run by the Department of Defense. Sandra slid another document across the table, her hand trembling. It was a detailed briefing paper stamped top secret, Testament program objectives. The text spelled out that Helen Diana Kesler had never been told. The program wasn't about curing disease or saving lives. Its real mission was to create genetically enhanced humans for military and intelligence purposes, engineered individuals capable of feats beyond normal biology. Enhanced strength, accelerated healing, heightened cognition, immunity to disease and toxins. The perfect soldier, the perfect spy, the perfect weapon. 7 subjects were created between 1973 and 1977, Sandra read, her voice barely above a whisper. 6 died before their first birthday. Only Subject 7 survived. Blackwood's eyes were fixed on me as if waiting to see whether I'd break or accept it. You were the success, he said finally. Every enhancement worked. Your DNA expressed all the target traits. A 1 in a billion fusion of your mother's intellect and your father's physical resilience. You were the crown jewel of the project, proof the impossible could be done. I couldn't even find the words. He kept talking. But when Diana learned the military planned to replicate you, to mass-produce your genome as a template for an army of enhanced operatives, she panicked. She made a choice. Sandra turned the page to a security report dated November 15, 1977. Testament Research Institute, catastrophic fire. 2 confirmed fatalities. 1 missing subject. All research presumed destroyed. But beneath that sterile language was something far more human. A letter in faded ink, handwritten by Diana Kesler herself, addressed to whoever might find it. Joyce's voice trembled as she read, If you're reading this, then my son Noah is safe, and I am gone. The people I worked for are not healers. They are architects of monsters. I've destroyed every trace of the program, data, samples, prototypes, everything except Noah. Please raise him as your own. Never tell him that Helen, never let him know what he is. The adoption papers are forged. His new name is Ethan Wade. Give him an ordinary life. That's the only gift I can leave him? My throat tightened. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stared at the evidence. Burned-out ruins, a woman's obituary calling her death a tragic lab accident, and a tiny newspaper clipping about a child placed with foster parents in Pennsylvania. Helen and Frank Wade, it said. A couple unable to conceive, suddenly blessed with a 3-year-old boy in need of a home. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. All I could think was that the people who raised me, who tucked me in, who loved me, had built their lives on a lie, but a lie that saved me. Here's where it gets complicated, Blackwood said, breaking the silence. He laid down newer documents, modern printouts, photographs, contracts. The Testament program was never fully terminated. The files were buried, renamed, shuffled between agencies. But certain people, certain interests, never stopped looking for you. Some want to unlock your biology for medicine, others want to replicate it for profit or power. And now, private defense companies are trying to revive the same research your mother died to destroy. He held up a glossy photo that made my stomach drop. Victor Hutchinson shaking hands with General Alan Whitaker, the original director of the Testament program, at a defense summit in 2018. Then another photo, Hutchinson Industries acquiring Biodyne Systems, a biotech firm specializing in genetic sequencing. Finally, a thick binder labeled Testament Revival Initiative, Proposal D. Victor Hutchinson has been searching for you, Sandra said quietly. Not for Ethan Wade, for Subject 7. He's spent over $40 million trying to recover anything tied to the original program, samples, tissue, blood records, even rumors. He doesn't know the man who used to run his logistics division is the very asset he's been chasing. That's impossible, I said, shaking my head. You're telling me my boss, the man who destroyed my life, is connected to this? But even as I said it, fragments began clicking into place like gears finding alignment. How I'd never gotten sick, not even once. When Laura and the kids were down with the flu. How I could work 18-hour days without coffee or fatigue. How numbers, routes, and supply chains formed patterns in my head faster than software could process. How cuts and bruises that should have taken weeks to heal disappeared overnight. How I'd survived a Denver winter that killed men half my age. Your blood, Blackwood said quietly, contains the only stable genetic model of its kind. Your DNA and bone marrow hold the code to recreate enhanced cellular regeneration and adaptive immunity. You're the most successful genetic advancement in human history, and that makes you valuable to people who don't care what happens to you. The air in the room felt thinner. I could feel my pulse in my ears. So what happens now? I asked. Blackwood exhaled slowly. That depends on who gets here first. Foreign governments would pay billions just to get a vial of your blood, Blackwood said, his voice low and grim. Pharmaceutical companies would do anything for a chance to sequence your genome. And Victor Hutchinson, he paused, letting the name hang like a curse. If he ever found out what you are, if he ever got control of you, he'd become the most powerful defense contractor on Earth. Entire governments would answer to him. I stared at the folder, every word blurring together. So what now? I asked quietly. You lock me in some underground lab? Run tests until I'm empty? Blackwood shook his head. No, your mother didn't die to make you a prisoner. She died to give you the one thing no one in this program ever had, choice, and I intend to honor that. He leaned forward. You have 3 options. First, we give you a new identity, a completely clean slate. You disappear somewhere safe, far away, with enough resources to start over. No one will ever find you again. Second, you stay under our protection and work with us. Our medical division will study your DNA, strictly for humanitarian purposes. You could help cure diseases, save lives, finish what your mother started. And the third, he hesitated. You go back to your old life and pretend none of this ever happened. But that option is suicide. I let the silence stretch for a moment, my mind spinning faster than it had in years. Then I said, There's a 4th option. Blackwood's brow furrowed. Go on. I sat back, the old fire returning to my veins. Victor thinks Ethan Wade is gone, right? He's already erased me. But what if someone else walked into his life? Someone with the right background, the right clearance, someone who could get close to his program. Blackwood stared at me, realization dawning. You're suggesting we put you inside Hutchinson Industries, undercover, as what? An informant? No, I said, as retribution, as justice. For the first time since my life had collapsed, I felt something more powerful than despair. Purpose. Blackwood studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, or the most reckless. Maybe both. The transformation took 6 months. The Department of Displaced Persons officially declared Ethan Wade dead. A John Doe was pulled from the South Platte River. Same height, same build, identified through falsified dental records crafted by Joyce's team. A small funeral was arranged. Laura played the grieving widow flawlessly, wearing black, shedding well-timed tears as Victor stood beside her, comforting her like a hero. My children stood at my grave, Lydia sobbing into her husband's shoulder, Eric standing rigid, jaw tight, fists trembling. They buried an empty coffin while I watched from a car parked across the street, my heart hollow but my mind razor sharp. I was already 40 pounds heavier from recovery, hair dyed black, eyes darkened with contact lenses. The man behind the wheel wasn't Ethan Wade anymore. He was David Cross. On paper, David was a defense logistics consultant with a Harvard MBA and 10 years' experience working for a private military contractor in Virginia. His background was spotless, impressive enough to make any CEO listen. A Department of Defense contact, an old ally of Blackwood's, inserted my new identity into the system. Digital fingerprints, tax records, employment history, all of it real enough to withstand scrutiny. Within 3 weeks, I was sitting in Victor Hutchinson's office again, the same office where he'd smiled and destroyed my life. Only now, I was a stranger to him. David, he said, glancing over my fabricated credentials, your experience is exactly what we need. We're expanding into biodefense logistics. Moving sensitive materials, research specimens, live samples, that sort of thing, requires discretion, security, precision. He chuckled lightly. The previous manager was incompetent. Drank himself to death, from what I hear. Pathetic, really. Left his family in ruins. I forced a polite smile and extended my hand. I won't disappoint you, sir. For a moment, I imagined wrapping my fingers around his throat instead, showing him what Subject 7 was capable of. But I wasn't here for revenge. Not yet. I was here for evidence. Within 2 months, I'd earned his trust. As David Cross, I managed Victor's most classified logistics branch, the Testament Revival Initiative. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. Victor had already recovered nearly 60% of the original Testament research, through black market dealers, stolen data, and corrupt officials. His private labs were reconstructing the program piece by piece, with funding from defense contracts disguised as biomedical development. He wasn't years away, he was months. And the breakthroughs they'd already made were terrifying. Through my secret contact with Blackwood's team, I learned that the medical division analyzing my DNA was uncovering miracles, potential cures for autoimmune diseases, tissue regeneration, even methods to reverse aging. Every cell in my body carried the future of medicine, and the blueprint for an unstoppable weapon. Victor Hutchinson thought he was building the next step in human evolution. He didn't realize he'd invited evolution itself to walk right back through his door. Dr. Miriam Ningguan, the lead geneticist on the humanitarian research team, was the first person who truly made me understand what my mother had been fighting for. She was small, quiet, with eyes that carried both exhaustion and conviction, the kind of scientist who still believed in good despite what science had done to her world. Your mother wasn't trying to create a weapon, she told me one night as we studied my test results under sterile light. She was trying to eliminate suffering, muscular dystrophy, ALS, cystic fibrosis. Your DNA could fix them all. The military stole her dream, but her intent was mercy, not power. Her words sank deep. For the first time, I felt like I was helping her finish something sacred. Every week, I met with Blackwood's people, sending encrypted intelligence about Victor Hutchinson's operations. Illegal shipments of genetic material, bribes to foreign officials, contracts masked as agricultural research but really funneling money into bioengineering. We gathered evidence of every crime, every treaty violation, every act of greed. Slowly, the case grew thick enough to bury him for life. But I wasn't satisfied with justice in secret. I wanted Victor to know exactly who had dismantled him. The hardest part of that double life wasn't the lies or the fear, it was staying away from my family, watching from afar while they rebuilt their lives on the ashes of mine. I needed them to know the tellin' about what really happened, but I couldn't risk exposure, so I sent anonymous packages, thick envelopes filled with proof, bank statements showing Victor's payments to Laura during their affair, emails planning my firing, security footage proving I'd been in my office during the hours they claimed I'd been embezzling company funds. I included a prepaid phone, untraceable, loaded with one number. 3 days later, it rang. "Dad?" Lydia's voice cracked, trembling between disbelief and tears. "Oh my God, Dad, we know everything. We showed Mom, she confessed. Eric's here too. We're so sorry. Please just tell us where you are. We'll come get you." My throat closed. I wanted to tell her everything, to run home and never look back. "I can't come back, sweetheart," I said, keeping my voice low, slightly altered. "But know this, I never stole a thing. I never betrayed anyone. I love you both more than life itself. Take care of each other. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous enemies come dressed as friends." She sobbed quietly, whispering that she loved me too. When the line went dead, I sat in the dark for an hour, staring at nothing. A week later, I called Mountain View Nursing Home. My mother, Helen West, had been declining fast, and the FBI had already told her son was dead. When she heard my voice, she gasped like she'd seen a ghost. "Tommy, I knew it," she cried. "I knew you weren't gone. A mother knows. But Tommy, they gave me a letter. From someone named Diana. She said you were special, that you were born to change the world. Why didn't you tell me you were adopted?" I closed my eyes. "Because you are my real mother," I told her. "You and Dad. You saved me. You raised me. You gave me the life she wanted me to have. Biology doesn't matter. Love does. Everything good in me came from you." She cried softly, whispering that she loved me, that she was proud. It was the last conversation we ever had. The end came on a Thursday morning. Federal agents hit Hutchinson Industries in a coordinated operation across 3 states. Warrants, seizures, arrests, everything timed to the minute. Victor was taken from his office in handcuffs, indicted on 37 counts of illegal genetic trafficking, bioweapons development, and conspiracy against the United States. Laura was charged as a co-conspirator for laundering funds and hiding assets. The empire they'd built on betrayal and blood collapsed overnight. Her luxury cars, jewelry, and the mansion that once belonged to me were seized under asset forfeiture. I was there that morning, standing among the crowd of employees outside the building, hidden in plain sight as Victor Hutchinson was led out in disgrace. He looked exhausted, confused, desperate. And then his eyes met mine. David Cross, the trusted consultant he'd bragged about at parties, the man who'd handed him the very rope he'd hung himself with. I let him see it. Just for a moment. The Tellin behind the disguise? Ethan Wade, Subject 7? The ghost of the man he thought he'd destroyed. Recognition hit him like a bullet. His face drained of color. His knees buckled, and the agents had to catch him before he fell. That was the moment I forgave myself. Not for what I'd done, but for surviving. Raymond Rodriguez, the Vietnam vet who'd saved me from freezing to death under a Denver bridge, now lives in a small apartment with steady heat and clean clothes. His rent's paid every month by an anonymous account. His medical care is covered, his dignity restored. Mercy House Shelter received a $10 million donation from an offshore trust, enough to triple their capacity and add a full medical wing. Sandra Pollson still works there, still welcomes the lost with that same tired kindness. And Dr. Evelyn Kessler's work, cleansed of its military roots, is changing the world. The treatments developed from her original research have cured thousands of children who were once condemned to die before kindergarten. The legacy that began in fire and lies has become light and healing. My mother's vision survived, and so did I. Veterans who'd lost everything to traumatic brain injuries are walking again, speaking again, regaining functions doctors swore were gone forever. The research derived from my DNA has rewritten what medicine thought it knew about healing. My blood, my genes, my mother's sacrifice, they all mattered in the end. Her work, twisted by greed and salvaged by courage, is finally doing what she wanted it to do: save lives. I remain David Cross in the world's eyes, a quiet consultant moving between research facilities across continents, overseeing the transport of medical innovations that began with my blood. The world sees a man coordinating logistics for breakthrough therapies. They don't see the ghost beneath, the last living echo of the Testament program ensuring his mother's dream stays pure. But when the city quiets at night and Denver's lights shimmer against the mountains, I remember who I used to be. I remember being Ethan Wade, the man who woke before sunrise to make coffee in a house filled with the soft noise of family. The man who believed hard work and decency were enough. The man who loved, trusted, and lost everything. Victor and Laura destroyed that life, but in their cruelty they forced me to confront the Tellin. They stripped away the illusion that I was just another ordinary man. The lesson I carry now is one born from fire and frost. Sometimes you have to lose everything to understand who you really are. Ethan Wade was buried by betrayal and humiliation, crushed under the weight of lies, left to freeze under a bridge with nothing but regret. But from his ashes rose something unbreakable. I learned that I was never ordinary. I was never meant to live and die behind a desk counting freight and scheduling drivers. I was the child my mother risked her life to save, the living embodiment of her brilliance and her compassion. Testament Subject 7, a medical miracle disguised as a broken man. Every morning I wake in my secure apartment, sunlight spilling through bulletproof glass, and I stand at the window overlooking Denver's skyline. It's strange how the same city can be both a graveyard and a birthplace. I think about the journey that led me here, the cardboard box of personal belongings I carried out of Hutchinson Industries the day I was fired, and the cardboard box that became my shelter under Spear Boulevard when I had nothing left. From corporate manager to street ghost, from Ethan Wade to nobody, from Noah Kesler, the lost child of a forbidden experiment, to David Cross, the man who reclaimed his mother's vision. Each identity stripped something from me: comfort, illusion, safety, until nothing was left but Tellin. We aren't defined by our names, our jobs, or the houses we live in. We are defined by our choices, by the lives we touch, by the good we protect when it costs us everything. My choices have cost me more than I can ever count, but they have also given me peace. Victor Hutchinson sits in federal prison now, serving 70 years without parole. His empire has been dismantled, its wealth redistributed to victims of his crimes. He spends his days in a concrete cell, a man who once ruled industries, now just another number in a jumpsuit. Laura lives quietly with her sister in Nebraska, working the register at a grocery store. Every diamond, every luxury, every drop of blood money was seized. My children, her children, don't speak to her. I sometimes wonder if she looks at the sky and thinks about the man she betrayed, the husband she helped bury alive, and somewhere in the mountains of Colorado there's a headstone engraved with my old name, Ethan Wade, 1974-2024, beloved husband and father. The grave is empty, but in Helen, it always was. Ethan Wade was a mask, a borrowed name, a vessel hiding what I really was. Standing over that plot one cold evening, I realized I wasn't mourning the man buried there. I was honoring him, because every version of me, Noah, Ethan, David, was necessary to become who I am now. My name is David Cross, but I am also Noah Kesler, and I was once Ethan Wade. I'm the homeless man who lived, the experiment who escaped, the ghost who turned into a guardian. I'm living proof that destruction can be the beginning, not the end. If you're hearing this, if my story has reached you, I want you to remember something that saved me when nothing else could. Your lowest moment might be the doorway to your true purpose. The people who destroy you might be unknowingly forging the version of you that the world needs most. Your pain, your losses, your failures, they can all be rewritten into something greater. Sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom or a headline. Sometimes it walks into a shelter, freezing, nameless, carrying 30 years of secrets and the power to change the world. That man was me. And maybe, in your own way, that person is you too. So thank you for listening to this story, my story. If it moved you, if it made you think about your own strength, about the possibility of redemption even when everything seems lost, then I ask you to share it. Like this video. Leave a comment below about a time when losing everything led you to something better, when failure became the foundation for your greatest success. Because sometimes we need to hear stories like this, not for entertainment, but to remember what's possible. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more stories like mine, true stories of transformation, justice, and the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary. Because every person you pass on the street carries a story you don't know yet. Some of those stories could save the world.